So here we are at Worldwide Technologies Raceway, otherwise known by 99% of the rest of the English-speaking world as Gateway, for the Bommarito Automotive Group of 500. And on the surface, on paper, this was a fuel mileage race, the largest margin of victory in the history of the race, even exceeding the kart races that were here. And it was a fuel mileage race in which Scott Dixon won. Tell me where you've heard that one before. But there were a lot of subtleties and interesting parts of this race that we have to talk about, as well as driver interviews, mainly talking about the different tire compounds. The first time since the 90s that we've seen more than one tire compound on an oval track. How did it work? Find out next. I don't think it's going to be quite enough to win the IndyCar championship, but I do want to say that Scott Dixon is doing his damnedest to kind of prove everybody wrong who says that Alex Palou is going to clinch before the last race. I think he is going to clinch before the last race at Laguna Seca, but Scott Dixon's Mr. August, man. We could say Mr. September, talk about Harry Gant, but it's obviously not September yet, and IndyCar barely races in September. But the fact that Scott Dixon comes on so strongly at the end of these seasons is just incredible and amazing to me. It seems he does it every year. It seems he's showing no signs of slowing down. And the way he wins races is just so different than every other driver. He and his strategist Mike Hull seem to just find new and interesting ways to fuel mileage the races to get them won for Chip Ganassi Racing. It's fascinating, but this was less about fuel mileage and more about tires, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in this video. Before we talk about Scott Dixon for the majority of this expose on Gateway, let's hear from a few other drivers in the race who we talked to after the fact, including points leader Alex Palou. So Alex Palou, you could have clinched the championship today, unable to do so. So that's pesky Scott Dixon, just keeps doing the fuel saving thing, but a solid day for you. I know the short ovals believe it or not, aren't your strength. You've got a lot of them, but just describe your day for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit tougher than what we wanted with that 9th position penalty, but obviously it was going to be a tough race. It's always tough to pass here. We had a lot of pace, but maybe not enough to do what Dixon did today. I mean, he got a bit lucky with that strategy, but he made it work. With one less stop. Everybody bailed out of that. So I didn't think we were going to be able to do so. So yeah, a P7 for us today it feels really good.
Ultimately, it was a track position race. They got track position with the yellow, and then he decided to save fuel where he could. I mean, each to their own. Look, I think we did a good job, apart from, out of all the spots where we probably could have taken our engine penalty, this probably wasn't the one where we thought we probably would be okay, because the track last year you could race, but this year we can't.
A bit of a tumultuous weekend for Marcus Ericsson, but you got a top 10 out of it. Give us your evaluation of that thing, because it wasn't smooth. The tire came off during the pit stop, but you still managed a top 10. Pretty good day, all things considered, I guess.
Yeah, I think, considering we had a new car today from yesterday, and, straight into qualifying and then into the race, I think that was a good effort. It was a shame during the pit stop that we lost the tire. We were sort of fighting with Rossi around that time, and then, we dropped back quite a bit. But, that's racing, that happens sometimes. I think we recovered quite well, and, another top 10, so that's not what we want, but it's a decent day.
And the results of today's Bommarito Automotive Group 500 here at Worldwide Technologies Raceway. Scott Dixon leading. We'll talk about him quite a bit more. Over Pato O'Ward, who was the fastest on the normal strategies today and should have won the race if not for that pesky Scott Dixon. Third was David Malukas, once again proving that he is such a good oval track driver, especially here at Gateway. Alexander Rossi quietly in the number 4 spot. Scott McLaughlin had some beef after the race with David Malukas. Obviously, they had a little bit of a coming together in turn 3 at one point. Thankfully, both drivers managed to get away with that one, but it surely cost McLaughlin a podium spot. Colton Herta as well had a good day, but a fairly quiet day for the driver who started on the front row. We talked to Alex Palou, champion-elect here in the IndyCars, and he wasn't quite able to clinch the championship today. Certainly with Joseph Newgarden falling out, that looked like a possibility, but once again, pesky Scott Dixon put a stop to that. Felix Rosenqvist looked strong at times, but wasn't on the right strategy for success today. Will Power was on the Scott Dixon strategy, but couldn't stretch the fuel or the tires as long as Scott. And we talked to Marcus Ericsson as well, who's had a tumultuous weekend to say the least. Losing his Indy 500 and really only chassis that he runs with to switch over to an Alex Palou backup car, but still a top 10 finish for him. Good on the day. Rinus VeeKay, a good run for Ed Carpenter Racing, which has struggled at this racetrack in the past. Romain Grosjean was also on the Scott Dixon strategy, didn't quite pull it off. Santino Ferrucci has the notable example or exception to that he is the first driver to put on the red tires in an oval race. Ed Carpenter not Ed Carpenter, that's the 20 car of Ryan Hunter-Reay. Maybe someday I'll remember that. Ryan Hunter-Reay just behind Santino Ferrucci. Kyle Kirkwood was strong at points. Again, another driver who tried the Scott Dixon strategy, couldn't quite pull it off. Connor Daly in his first drive for Rahal Letterman Lanigan, just ahead of his teammate Christian Lundgaard. In fact, the fastest Rahal Letterman Lanigan driver in the field. Linus Lundqvist in his first IndyCar oval race, just behind the Rahal drivers. Devlin DeFrancesco made some interesting moves, but didn't have the result. Then it was Graham Rahal just behind him. Stingray Robb, who struggled quite a bit. Augustine Canapino, who was up there on strategy at one point. Elio Castroneves, Ed Carpenter, Joseph Newgarden. The oval streak ends. A driver will not sweep all of the oval tracks in 1 year. It was contact with the wall while chasing down Pato O'Ward. That wouldn't have ended up mattering anyway in terms of the win because, of course, Scott Dixon exists. Takuma Sato had a miserable day, ended up in the turn 2 wall. Callum Ilott was mad at Takuma Sato for putting him in the turn 2 wall, and Ed Carpenter bulldozed Benjamin Peterson going into turn 1, and that was the end of his day. So one of the big talking points going into this weekend, and of course the big talking point after the race, was the fact that alternate tires were used and came from Firestones. First time since 1999 we've seen that in an IndyCar oval race. Scott Dixon actually suggested that the tires were too similar, and you'll hear that from a lot of other drivers as well. He actually suggested that perhaps a combination of more degradation would be good for the racing product. Here's what some other drivers had to say. Big talking point from all the drivers was the alternate tires and maybe the lack of improvement or difference in the racing. I know McLaughlin was talking a lot about the marbles. So what was your experience out there with the alternate tires versus last year with just one compound?
Yeah, honestly, it didn't really make a difference. I don't think anybody found a lot of pace on those or a lot of deck or anything like that. And it's a tough course to go on 2 lanes like what we have in Texas. So yeah, it was a good try. Honestly, I think it's good that we try that stuff, but I don't think we got what we wanted. So yeah, hopefully next year they try something else and it works.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Quick one on the tires, if it's okay. You mentioned a lot of marbling, so you would go back to 1 tire compound, or would you maybe change the 2 tire compound?
No, yeah, I don't know whether it's the compound that we've brought this year where it's just marbling up a lot more, but certainly like the lane, like it was like there's no point us doing the highline practice yesterday because it just did nothing. It helps for the first few laps, but even that we didn't have enough rubber down there. It is what it is. Like we're trying bits and pieces to spice up this racing. Unfortunately, that didn't work. I applaud IndyCar for trying, but it's just I don't think this one worked.
Good stuff.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you. What was your evaluation of the Reds versus the Blacks out there? That was the first significant track time anybody's gotten on that red tire since 2019. So what was it like for you to have 2 compounds out there?
No difference really. I don't know. It had a red sidewall and didn't change a lot for me. So I was hoping and expecting to be a bit more of a difference maker, the red versus the black tire. But for me, couldn't hardly feel any difference.
So there is definitely a differing of opinions among the drivers. What else is new? Certainly, I think the fans are going to call this race boring. I think it was probably more compelling over the whole of the race, more compelling than last year. I think last year's finish obviously was more exciting, but I think I agree with a lot of other drivers, including Alexander Rossi, who expressed that this race really should be a night race. I would love it to see it brought back to night. Obviously, there are complications with that. This race runs on the weekend that NASCAR runs on Saturday night as a playoff cutoff race at Daytona, so it's tough to do it that way, and then running a Sunday night race would be a complete killer thing, a killer choice for the crowd, and I don't know. I would love to see it, but I understand the reasons why the race takes place when it does. In terms of the alternate tires and the decision of IndyCar and Firestone to do that, I definitely agree with a lot of the drivers. I really am happy that they tried something. Did it work right off of the bat? Was it like the changes to Texas? No, but I think that there are elements that could be enhanced or changed next year, as Scott Dixon put it in the post-race press conference, that could be made to this race to get a little more aggressive with the tires and improve the show for next year. I don't think it's a totally lost cause. I think, the marbles are definitely a problem too, but I think that's just a part of this racing circuit. It's a much lower banked track than a lot of the other ones that the Indy cars go to. And it's not like Indianapolis where the straightaways are long enough where you get a run on somebody, you can actually pass them before you have to get back into that single file deal. This is a bull ring. It's a super speedway that races like a bull ring, I guess would be the best way to put it. So it puts IndyCar racing in a tough spot with how they want to manage this race and amp up the show. But I don't think it was like a totally lost cause either. I mean, the fact that the margin of victory was what it was because Scott Dixon threw the kitchen sink at the strategy and actually got it to work. And I think that's a testament to the fact that there was something different this year. The alternate tires made everybody think, and I think from the perspective of IndyCar racing, in this era that we're in, where the cars are so similar, some people would call them spec, some people would call them not, but I think the best way to put it is very similar teams, very similar level of quality of equipment, and that means that the racing is extremely close, but oftentimes it means that it's single file and no one can pass. So I think the more things you can change, whether that be strategy or otherwise, to try to mix things up, that will always make the show better, in my opinion. Joseph Newgarden obviously lost the championship today. He didn't really have a chance anyway. I mean, I've been calling Alex Palou champion-elect for the last 2 or 3 races at this point, and it really is, I think, Alex Palou's title. It's just kind of a formality at this point, and I think he'll probably win it at Portland. But, of course, Scott Dixon will probably have something to say about that, won't he? But Joseph Newgarden, he hadn't lost an oval race since Marcus Ericsson beat him and 32 other drivers in the Indianapolis 500 in 2022. And so Scott Dixon has accomplished something that no one else has done in over a year, which is beat Joseph Newgarden on an oval. And Joseph really was the class of the field early on today. And in fact, in terms of pace, looked like he had the best car. Now, Pato got ahead of him on the strategy, but I guess we'll never find out what would have happened if Joseph and Pato had ended up running together to the end of the race. But yeah, it's kind of a historic. There's always history when Scott Dixon wins it, but it's also the end of a historic run for Joseph Newgarden. But I definitely think he'll be back, and he'll be just as strong as ever on the oval track. So yeah, here we are at Gateway. I hope you've enjoyed my coverage of this weekend's proceedings. Definitely difficult with as much rain as we had over yesterday to build up storylines, but I hope the Garage Tour, sans one team, was good for you guys to give you a preview and get you primed for this weekend. Portland coming up, and then Laguna, and that's the end of the IndyCar season, and then we just launch into the silly season, which, oh boy, after walking around the paddock, there's a lot of things to talk about, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.